Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Ariella Sophie. I work for the Clackamas Arts Alliance. You can see our little logo there. If you're not familiar with us, I recommend check out our website. You can also look at us on Instagram. We have an email newsletter if you're into that. We have a bunch of series of events like this one. The career panel is kind of a special thing, but we also have other professional development workshops for artists of all sorts, which are everything from legal advice to how to harness social media. And you all might be totally fine with social media. You might not be. You can find a good community of other people. We also try to have gatherings that we move around the county. So I'm passing around a worksheet, and we're gonna start off. I just want you, if you're looking at that, you can take a little time to reflect on yourself. My personal belief is that the better you know yourself, the better you're gonna be equipped to find the job, the career, the lifestyle that really speaks to you, right? You might say, gosh, I really love sewing, painting, cartooning, whatever it is, but that might only be fun for you a small sliver of the time. And there might be other skills involved in, say, the business side of things that you might say, I don't like that so much at all. So you'll have a little of an opportunity to reflect on that. And I will also make sure that this form is available to you all after the event as well. So if you find it easier to think about this, type it on your own terms later, you don't like handwriting, that's fine. Just know that I'll make that available. So spend a little time. You can think about, how do you like to work? What do you like to work with? One easy thing to think about is, so I'm a former art teacher, and I know I would do lots of materials play with my students, and they would get to try out charcoal, which if you've ever worked with charcoal, you know how it is on your fingers, and you might be like, yeah, I love the messy nature of it, and you might say, never again, right? So you might have some easy things to rule out. I prefer three-dimensional work myself. Also spend a little time thinking about what your strengths are. And I want you to look a little beyond who you are as a maker, as an artist. Think about, what other people compliment you on. Are you really good at being detail-oriented and focused? Are you really outgoing? Think about a few other things like that. And then there's a whole section on what motivates me. You can spend hours and hours studying this, but think about those times when you felt yes, I'm really proud of what I accomplished there. That's a really good signature. For myself, and I'm just speaking to myself as an example, I'm not the example of all life at all, but I can only speak from personal experience. I remember when I was a lot younger thinking, oh my gosh, I was so proud when I was able to tell my friend about this other opportunity, and I connected her with this thing that was super meaningful for her. And I realized, oh yeah, I'm really motivated by boosting other people up, those social connections. And that's a bit of a keynote. All right. This is a little graphic I put together. So some of those motivational types you might think of. I'll begin at the top and then go clockwise. Physiological is your body. We all have this as our needs, right? We all gotta eat, we gotta sleep, we gotta stay warm, we gotta breathe clean air. We all have that to some extent as part of our motivation, but sometimes that's your dominant motivation for doing something. Competence, think of those people and you all know someone like this, where they want to be super, super, perfect at something. They want to be super skilled. I think of my dad with this because he's a precision craftsman engineer. He repairs speaker parts, which have zero margin for error. Is it that exciting? For him, it is. Caretaking, and we'll have some great people speaking to this. We all know people like this as well, the people who are putting you first, they're putting their dog first. They're really capable of that nurturing connection, and that might be you. Achievement, someone who's really good at setting goals, whether that's running a marathon or saying, I'm going to write, draw, make this thing by this particular date. I'm gonna meet my deadlines, and I feel really good about that. And again, that can be in many aspects of your life. Self-expression, and you might see on that worksheet, I'm gonna grab another example of it so I can look at it. I've broken these down because it's hard sometimes to think of these with art. So I've done another analogy, which is cooking. And I'm a big fan of the show Chef's Table, if anybody's seen that. And I'm a total cooking nerd, and so some of these might be familiar examples if you've watched Chef's Table. So my example from a chef is someone who's thinking about their childhood nostalgically, and they're making a meal to tell a story, right? Yeah, you can do that. You can also do that with your art. We'll hear from some people who do exactly that. And I'm looking at one person, but I'm sure that's true in general. Investigation. This is definitely a story from Chef's Table. A guy who had a fridge full of asparagus and said, what on earth can I make with all this asparagus? It's gonna be like asparagus for dinner, asparagus for dessert, asparagus ice cream, asparagus souffle. And that process itself, it doesn't all taste good, look great, come out perfectly, but that process of experimentation is really interesting. Affiliation, it's about that community connection, which might be a little different than that nurturance and that caretaking, but building bridges and connecting people. So building like a community through a potluck dinner, perhaps. Incentive, that's, again, it's a little, in some ways, a little bit like physiological, where you're motivated maybe by something else as well. You think of sort of the perks. You might like the work itself, but you're like, oh, I want to be a cook because that means I can travel. Like, I have a friend who's a chef from Australia, and he's like, I get to visit the United States and be a cook here, or learn a new language while I'm traveling. Power and status, which might just be kind of exactly what it sounds like. I think we all can think of some good examples of this, right? But you like to be in charge. And that's great. And there are people, there are roles where you need to be that person who's in charge. You need to have someone who's a clear director. And there's also roles where that personality is very much not suited to, as we can imagine. And then, I started with physiological, but you're cooking because you need to eat. It might just be ramen, might just be pizza. So thanks for spending a little time thinking about those. I want to make a lot of space for our career panelists. This is me. I don't need to speak too much about myself. Like I said, I work for the Clackamas Arts Alliance, and I'm the Community Outreach and Engagement Manager. My work involves a lot of community building and doing events like this and talking to people. So I'm an artist and a maker, but I also need to talk to people. I'm going to talk quickly. My background is in teaching, as I said. I think it's really important to think about what you're good at and what didn't work for you. So I'll just share my big professional fail, which is my first job out of college. I was like, God, I love reading so much. I want to be an editor. So I worked at this big publishing house in New York City, and we're going to hear about someone who works in publishing now. But for me, I was copy editing copyright pages. And if you don't know what a copyright page is, that's fine, because it's really boring. It's the thing you flip over when you're starting to read a book. And I had a job that was just reading those all day long in a little tiny cubicle alone. And as you've probably already gotten an impression from just interacting with me, I like talking to people. It's kind of important to me. And I, after 9 months of that, I was like, I cannot handle this. I need to be around people. So that's been a big keynote for me as I've sort of thought through what my career trajectory looks like. So for me, building community through art is really powerful and impactful. It's where I want to be. Same thing with teaching. You're building a classroom community and you're supporting other people. That speaks to me personally, because I'm coming from that affiliative type. And it took me a while to learn that, and I'm trying to give you these tools as a resource so you'll make some failures. Expect that. You can think about some things as just sketches. You'll wash them out, you'll move on. But maybe you don't have to make as many. We'll just say that. All right. Next slide, some of my artwork. You can see me teaching, you can see some events. I do textiles. I made a sign to welcome Ukrainian immigrants. It's all good. Let's move on. We'll start with Mary.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mary. I use she, her pronouns, and I direct the art therapy program at Lewis and Clark College. Steps that I got to this place. It's been quite a journey. I'm a musician and an artist. I also am a filmmaker. I chose art therapy mainly because I didn't want to make art to sell it and to be critiqued, but more as a catalyst for care and healing, and just connecting with other people through art making really fulfills me, and holding space for other people to express themselves and connect with each other fulfills me. So being able to facilitate that in a community really is meaningful. If I think back to the misstep that I made, My first job was working in a nursing home, and it was caring for people that couldn't care for themselves. And I was way out of my league, like moving people out of beds into wheelchairs and helping like them clean themselves or eat. Like it was just really hard work. And it was not where I wanted to be. And at the time, my grandma was also lived in another state, and she was she was ill, and so I was having a lot of like emotional connection with the job, and it was just really too much. So I had to pivot and shift gears. I grew up in a rural place where there was not a lot of things going on, and we didn't have like the internet or cable TV. So I spent a lot of my time just making art. My family also, my parents grew up in a lower socioeconomic status and worked really hard to get to where they were, and dealt with some alcoholism in my family. And so I think I was motivated to help others because I saw my parents realizing that they needed to take care of themselves, and they were giving of service of themselves. So that was, I think, I could see the value in their work and effort. So I think that's why I kind of pivoted into this direction. I'm not sure what else to say. Oh yeah, here's some of my art. So yeah, I'm also an artist, and I studied painting in my undergrad degree in a space much like this. You can see this first piece I made when the last Trump administration started, and it's called Sam is Pissed. This piece over here is an encaustic piece that I made, and it's about, I have a 13-year-old, but at the time she was 5, and it's about like becoming aware of the dangers that are in society, and my fear of needing to protect her, but also letting her like explore the world and deal with the dangers that are lurking. And then this is my friend Sarah. She's a musician and Indigenous, and I made this piece just reflecting on her Indigenous heritage, and it's called Indigenous Gem. She's never cut her hair, so I actually hand-stitched the braid into the painting, and I made the blanket out of felted wool. And then this piece here is a collaboration I did when I was serving as a commissioner on the Oregon City Arts Commission, and I facilitated a mural with community members on the Oregon City Bridge, bringing together the community to create a mural that was bringing together the two communities of West Linn and Oregon City. And I got the chance to work with Native artists in the center panel. And I think this was on display at the Oregon City Library. It might still be there. So my work as an art therapist is really about bringing communities together and healing. Do I talk now about my handouts, or are we going to come back to that? Okay, so I think I'm good.
Hello, everybody. Rob Campbell here. I am the owner of a retail store in downtown Milwaukee called Made in Milwaukee. It's art and apparel. You know, she knows it. But I've been screen printing mostly T-shirts for 20 years, mostly out of various basements and garages. Outgrew these spaces long ago, but don't want to pay rent anywhere. And I do have a degree in English for some reason. Got it because I think you were just supposed to at the time. You're supposed to have a degree, I guess, if anybody wants to buy it. I'm not using it much. But yeah, I put in my career, this is my example of like, I'm a big proponent of having your finger in a lot of pies, or diversifying what you do. I used to work at a video store coffee shop that's still around in Milwaukee called Great American Video. At the same time, I was a karaoke jockey in a popular karaoke bar. And so that's like 3 of the 4 big Portland jobs. Like if I was brewing beer, that would have been the final. Instead, I got into screen printing, which is also pretty high up there. And I'm hoping to one day accidentally become the mayor. I'm hoping I want to be accidental mayor, like somehow through some mistake in accounting that I'm just suddenly the mayor of Milwaukee. But so fingers crossed on that. put as my personal fail that I made every mistake while learning screen printing. There's a lot of that particular art style has a lot of ways you can screw things up, from making the screens and exposing the screens to light for the right amount of time. And there's just so many things. And so I kind of learned, I didn't ask help enough, which is something I would like to encourage. I'm super excited to help people. And so if you're ever nervous about oh, I want to learn screen printing, but I don't want to bother Rob, it's fine. I just bother them. And if they're not nice to you, just move on, forget them. And the meaningful experience is making every mistake possible. It also is a huge learning tool. In fact, I printed, one of the things we learned after printing t-shirts for so long, I print t-shirts usually celebrating Milwaukee and local. This is very specific to an unincorporated Clackamas County, which are these little sections of Milwaukee that I thought was fun as a tourist shirt. You don't have to live there to wear the shirt. You can visit there. And instead of a seagull, we did a Canadian goose because there's a lot of those. And instead of a palm tree, we put in a tree of heaven, which is an invasive species that Milwaukee hates. But then I also started printing onto Goodwill paintings. So this is found art. My friend Tyler Spencer did some handwritten text, and we started collecting Goodwill paintings. So they're all of various qualities. Some really great, some really awful. And the phrases I think are apropos for what we're doing here. We'll start with you have nothing to fear but failure, shame, loneliness, and death. So nothing to fear but those things. So don't worry too much. Hang in there because your alternatives are equally hopeless is another. We have up to 7 phrases, but these are the ones that my favorite is. It's never too late to give up on your dreams, which is it's got levels because this is a person that painted this lovely painting, gave it to a thrift store. They gave up on painting, and now I sell it for a reasonable price, and they're succeeding. They don't even know. And we've never met an artist we never stumbled on anybody that was like, hey, I painted that. I have a feeling they'd be pretty excited. And so, yeah, it's actually also not giving up on your dreams also means that if something's not working out, if you're not feeling really good at something, you can change course. It's never too late to, whatever you think you want to be, don't tie yourself to any one thing. Diversify. I have so many things going on that when I fail at something, I don't have time to process it. I'm like, I'll just try one of the other 12 things that I'm doing. You can either be really good at 1 or 2 things, or good enough at a lot of things. So I'm good enough is kind of my catchphrase. Let's look at these. This is just some examples of the screen printing. Spatula Cities from a Weird Al movie, and it comes with a free spatula from the Dollar Tree. Pancakes. The other thing is I also have figured out that I'm okay at art, the art part of it, the getting down to a blank canvas and making the art. I can do parody, I can do a little bit here and there, but I've really come to accept that I'm good at producing art and teaming up with and surrounding myself with talented artists and having a lot of ideas for artists to make happen. These are all ways, if you aren't good at putting pen to paper, there's lots of ways to still be artistic. I have a huge, at my store at Made in Milwaukee, we have over 100 local artists on consignment. They bring their stuff in. Every week I come into some brand new weird thing, some jewelry, some 3D printed magnet penis, which is what we have now for some reason. We have tons of stuff. And I've so much so that I've just recently started doing vending machines. That's my first major vending machine. I bought it from the Venderia, which is Taylor is a woman who has these art machines in all these different bars all over town, filled with mystery socks or little prints of local artists, or there's so many things you can do. And so now I have another way to sell without even being there. And so that's that. There's my store. Pancakes is I have a series of heavy metal designs that are celebrating mundane things couch naps. I think maybe jigsaw puzzles might be next. I'm not sure. And then this is an example of the community. So I'm really getting involved in Milwaukee, and the downtown business of Milwaukee is really big for me. And so we do this event around Halloween, the Milwaukeeing Dead, where we face paint people. So we have face painters on site, and then we all at a certain time shamble down to Pietro's Pizza, and and so creating, again, that's an example of surrounding yourself with weirdos. Yeah, always do that. And that's me. I'm Rob. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nora Crean. Thank you, Ariella, Sophie, and Clackamas Community College for having us. when Ariella Sophie was organizing this event and told me about it, my immediate thought was, holy crap, I wish I had done something like this like 10 years ago. So I hope you all are able to get something out of it. I'm currently the Public Art and Collections Manager at the Arts Council of Lake Oswego, and I arrived there in a really roundabout way. I can't say that I, as a 5-year-old strove to be this role, but I'm quite proud of it and consistently learning, so that really appeals to me. I went to school at University of Colorado. I grew up in Washington, D.C. They're basically opposite places. And I went into college thinking that I wanted to study physics. I then moved to biology and was working at the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research, counting weevils in plants in a freezer, and realized that it wasn't quite for me. And at that time, the museum studies program at Boulder was really blossoming. So I was catching wind of all these curriculums that just sounded really exciting to me. And so that's how I pivoted into art. And then funny enough, I kind of 180'd, and now I'm studying chemistry at Portland Community College to prepare to go back to school, to graduate school, to study conservation, hopefully objects conservation. So it is a degree that is that warrants probably just as much work as law school and some medical degrees. The programs in the US are incredibly small, so they have 20 spots for 700 applicants, and it requires a lot of chemistry, basically a lot of hours working hands-on, working with conservators. So basically every day that I would go to class, I would question why I was doing this. But I really love working with materials, and I love getting a chance to understand how materials are interacting on a molecular level. And artwork is basically the best playground for this kind of review. There's also so many other things that are involved in conservation, like ethics and history, tons of stuff. So that's what I'm interested in, and lucky enough, I'm able to tie that into my current work at the Arts Council, because in public art and collections, there should always be some type of conservation practice happening. So I've been able to strengthen that and implement it in the current program we have over there, and then as well, I'm able to just learn a bunch. So I was living in San Francisco for a decade prior to moving to Oregon, and that was like a little bit more like glitzy, because I was working at these music venues and working in clubs, underground clubs, and doing art programming there. And I ended up starting a pretty decent artist residency program at a huge venue called the Midway in the Dog Patch in San Francisco. And then I sustained that for about 4 years until I moved here. And that was just a huge learning experience. I had a great time. I also, at times, had a miserable time. But I learned, very opposite to Ariella Sophie, I don't like doing events, and I don't like being on call for artists all the time. I would rather be kind of like in a zone, like gathering research and like data and things like that. So that was a great learning experience. It was also a lot of fun. I made amazing friendships with a lot of the artists who were in my program, and yeah, it was a good time. It was a stressful time, but a good time. Yeah, I've always worked at least 2 jobs. I think probably most of you know, and I could be misspeaking, but a job in the arts does not pay well. So I've always had to work multiple jobs to achieve the like financial status that I needed. And that was something that sometimes I had no problem with, and sometimes I did. But essentially, like Rob, it's afforded me to have my hands in a whole bunch of different things, which I think has just set me up for more success in my career, which I didn't plan for, but it's kind of happened that way. So yeah, I don't know. I've worked a lot of jobs. I could probably talk about that forever. You know, one of my biggest fails, which I thought about as I drove over here, was I should have gone to community college, and I should have spent time in between high school and college not going to college, because those student loans are no joke. And I pivoted so many times that it literally cost me. So while I cherish my education, and education is one of the things no one can take away from you, and I have a lot of pride in what I've learned, I also am in so much debt. So community college would have been a much wiser decision. And when my baby comes, I will say, you go to community college first, and then we can talk about other stuff. Yeah, for meaningful experiences, like I mentioned, I started going back to school to study chemistry, and going back as an older adult has been so enlightening. And it's not like, oh, I'm kind of stumbling into college. It's like, I really want to be here because I just worked a full day and now I'm in class. So if I don't want to be here, then why am I here? You know, so it's been, the teachers for the most part have been really fantastic, and I've made some friends. It's been a great experience. And then I'll say the mentors that I've met, who maybe don't even realize that I'm calling them my mentors, a lot of mostly older women that I've worked with at different jobs, just like basking in their wisdom and asking them loads and loads of obnoxious questions, and always showing up by their side, ready to learn and ready to just take in what they're willing to give. That's been so incredibly helpful in not just forming my career, but you know, myself as a woman. Okay, so that photo on your top right, or the top corner that says Midway Gallery under it, that was one of the studios at the Midway of the artist residency that I started. That was one of the artists. We had been hanging out, and I took a photo of her space at that point in time. Just below it, that was a really fun gig. Another arts organization called Fault Radio, still going strong in San Francisco. I curated an exhibition with them during COVID, which was a really fun experience as well. Just said yes to as many things as possible, and I think that's been key. Those photos of the artwork close up, that's what I'm currently working on. The photo of the concrete on the top there, it might be hard to see, but there's some lichen in that crack on the bottom after 3 different types of treatments and work with a conservator. That lichen was safely removed. The aggregate of that concrete is actually quite soft, so it was a little challenging to treat. The metal work there, that piece is a powder-coated sculpture, and if you are a sculptor and you're working in mild steel, please come see me, because we are seeing this problem a lot with outdoor sculptures. Essentially, the powder coating seal fails, which is quite common, and then corrosion occurs, which is inevitable in all metal pieces, and then you can't repair it because of the powder coating. So, so those are some fun collections things, and yeah, I think that's it.
Oh, sweet, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Dewey. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up in a museum, which was awesome. So I got to see actual, like, ongoing conservation of things where, like, there would be, a 4-ton Anselm Kiefer painting done on steel that had wax and it had oil paint and it had all this stuff. And stuff was constantly falling off of it because he wasn't thinking when he put it together, like, oh, this is going to stand the test of time. He was just trying to do a piece that was about the Holocaust. It was like immediate and really visceral. And so they would have these moving sections of the wall. So as a little kid, I would get to see sections of the museum wall move. And then they would take it back into this hallway, and there'd be people who studied chemistry and history and ethics, and like, okay, how much of this do I commit to replacing if the natural part of the process is it falling apart, that kind of stuff. So also as a little kid, I, because my dad worked in part of the museum called Extensions Division initially, they would have all of this stuff. So like not just, okay, they have got a Van Gogh on display, but are there any sketches as part of the collection that they don't necessarily display, but are worth keeping and looking at? And maybe they would figure out, okay, where can we put these things? So as a little kid, my dad would get in these, big box like FedEx style trucks with these foam posts, and he would take these pieces that were maybe not the top tier of the exhibit stuff, and he'd bring them to different institutions around Cleveland, Ohio, and they'd have a themed window. So he got really into that. That eventually got him to be the supervisor of public programming. So as a little kid, I worked with him on coming up with projects for other little kids. So I started teaching art when I was 13. And I did that until he passed away when I was 20. And then I was in college and I went to school for painting because I thought, well, that's the peak of visual language because there was hierarchy of stroke. I like the idea that you could, use combinations of hue and value, but not only that, there was like the nature of how you applied material. There were all these different things you could do. But as a little kid, I also really, really loved comic books. And so, you can have this tension between what's considered fine art and what's considered popular art. And, I spent a long time also playing a lot of guitar as a kid. And I taught guitar lessons from the time that I was 20 until I moved here when I was 25. And I, also sort of came around at the time that CDs were falling out of favor. And I remember one of the last gigs I played when I was in Portland was I was between a big jumbo screen of a football game and a dartboard. And I was like, well, okay, if I have to choose, I'm going to choose comics because I love that just as much, and there's places for me to go with that. So ultimately, I started going to conventions. I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2006. This is after I graduated from college. I graduated at the top of my class. I received a traveling scholarship as a result to authenticate that. And that's one of my regrets I never said, but I didn't use it because I was like, well, my dad had passed away. I didn't have anywhere to go back to. So I was just shuffling from place to place with all my stuff. It wasn't easy for me to pivot and go somewhere. And I thought, well, I can use it to move to Portland. And I talked to the director of the Cleveland Institute of Art where I'd gone to school and won the scholarship. And he's like, you can't do that. So then it just languished because I spent all this time in Portland just trying to make my, temporary stay into a long-term living situation. So I lived in a garage without windows, and I biked everywhere because I didn't have a car, and I was still playing gigs, and then that kind of fell apart, and I worked for a before and after school arts program for kids age 5 to 10. And I had, in Cleveland, I worked for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Cleveland Institute of Art, as the first TA in the school's history teaching painting. I worked for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a bunch of different things like that, teaching workshops. Came out here, I worked for the Portland Art Museum for one workshop, and I was dating a girl who worked there, and we broke up, and then it didn't go so good after that. But then I went to a convention here in Portland that was called Stumptown. So it was a smaller convention. It wasn't it was before Rose City, and they would host it at the DoubleTree. And my mentor, it's really important to have a mentor, is a guy named Steve Lieber. So he's also from the Midwest. He went to the Kubert School of Cartooning. He's an amazing person. And I showed him my stuff, And he sounds like Kermit the Frog. It's awesome. He said, well, I could have you do some backgrounds for me if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And I let my Midwestern sense of like, well, he's just being nice, stop me from working with him. So I spent another year working at a pizza place before I took him up on his offer, joined this group that at the time was called Periscope Studio. And then I was there for 7 years, effectively getting the equivalent of like a master's degree or doctorate in comics. I wouldn't claim that degree, but you're spending this much time around skilled professionals who can say, hey, you're good at this, you're bad at that. Or here's the thing that you lean into way too much and you got to get rid of that. So I did that for 7 years. And then my wife and I bought a house in Milwaukee, which I don't regret doing, although it was super challenging at the time. And I finally finished my backyard studio after 8.5 years of building it. So right now I work for, at the moment, a video game company called Steam. And I also am drawing Conan for a publisher called Heroic Signatures. But I've worked for Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, IDW, Boom, Oni. I'm trying to remember if there's, basically anybody who's ever published a comic book, I've worked for them. And I've also made shitty little ash can comic books that I hope nobody ever finds again. But I've been published by Macmillan with this book that's my favorite thing I ever made. It's called The Tragedy Series. It was on Tumblr. It did really well when that was a thing. And then there's a lot of stuff I can tell you about the process of like, if you make a book, if you have all these great ideas and you think it's going to be the greatest thing ever, there's a lot of stuff you can't control about that, but there is stuff you can control, and I'll do my best to articulate that too. Like most consistent personal fail is that, and this is like, something that a lot of other panelists have talked about, you're gonna have failures. And your ability to sustain yourself as a creative professional of any kind is your ability to bounce back from when something hasn't gone well. If you take it as a reflection on, I'm not good at this, I can't do it, the people who do it, so many of them are so bad at what they do, or they take so long. So all the stuff you think is like, oh my God, how amazing is that? That thing took them a week to do. In most cases, professionally, I don't have the luxury of that time. I have to do stuff in 2 days, 4 days, whatever. And so sometimes you end up doing stuff you love, some stuff you end up drawing, I don't know, I did a presentation for Nike that was all just internal to make them feel better about their jobs. It was so dumb. But it paid me enough that I could then make some time to make my stuff. My most meaningful experience was working with my dad because he demonstrated a lot of things for me. One of the things was that there's not any one way to be an artistic person, and that you want to be as accommodating, as interesting, and interested in other people's lives as possible. Because he could do a lot of easy code switching between being this professional who worked at the museum, but he'd have to deal with the public because Cleveland Museum of Art is a free museum. So people could come in on the weekends, and we would have to have workshops that worked for people who were tiny little people, 5 years old, to grandparents in their 90s, and every walk of life you can imagine. So the aptitude that you develop in terms of interacting with other people is just as, if not more important than whatever your amazing talent might be. Because, believe me, and I'm sure you know this because you're people who have access to the internet, there is a ridiculous bonkers level of talent out there. And, some of those people might not have your skill at interacting with other humans, and that's where your success will come in. Because my mentor said, you gotta be at least 2 of these 3 things: fast, nice, or super talented. And so I think about that all the time, and it's true. All right, well, you can look at some of my stuff. I wasn't sure what to pick, so I picked a handful of things that I didn't get my first computer until I was 24. So it took me a long time to learn how to do things digitally. But that cover there on your left is for a book I did for Oni called I Was the Cat. If you ask me about that after this, I will tell you every part of the mistakes I made during that. Because I had done a bunch of freelance stuff, and they were like, hey, do you want to do a whole graphic novel where it's just you coloring and drawing and doing everything? And I was like, yeah, I do. And it turned out I did the math. I made like $7 a page. It's crazy. I love this series from the 80s starring Jeremy Brett. as Sherlock Holmes. It's from 1984 to 1994. I think he's exceptional and awesome. So that's just some fan art I made for myself. There's a cat I painted. I like to do watercolors from life. And then Mr. Spock, because I love Star Trek, and occasionally I do get to make fan art, and I try different types of things. So sometimes I do digital painting. Sometimes I was like, well, what would it look like if I did a kind of scratchy, much more like old school comic style drawing? So I don't know. That's my stuff. And nice to meet you all, and I'm hoping we can be of help.
Tough act to follow. Comics and everything, they're gonna love it. Darn, okay, well, I'm Chloe. I'm a junior designer for Celadon Books, which is a division of Macmillan Publishers, which you've published a book with, so that's a great tie-in right there. I guess the first thought I have is that I'm sitting here giving advice to young people, and I'm thinking about the advice from other people that have gone through so much I haven't experienced. And so I hope that you continue to, take in advice and receive it and give advice throughout your career. Constantly, you're never past that. And I think that it's a good outlook, because I still feel like I need advice on my career, even though I am sitting here giving you advice. So it's constant and cyclical. I went to Rhode Island School of Design for painting and art history. You might have heard of it. It's a very high pressure, intense school on the East Coast. And I was very lucky to go there, and I learned so much from that experience. And then I was an art teacher for 7 years in public schools, so I've taught every single grade level. I think some of my students they go to this community college. If anyone's from Estacada, I taught the middle school there last. That was my last assignment. So that was pretty fresh. I started, basically after art school, during art school, I was trying to find my way and trying to figure myself out. And my own practice is drawing and painting, but then it's okay, then I need to make money. What am I gonna do? I started pivoting towards community and connection. I had been a camp counselor, and so I knew that really came easily to me and gave me a lot of meaning in my life when I felt a little bit I don't know what I want to do after college. So I'm really grateful for those years of teaching, but I also changed. I was in California. I did elementary first, then I did high school. COVID broke out when I was in my first full year of teaching, which is already insane. And I looked the same age as the students, and I was teaching high school, which was hard. And I have to sort of guide these young people, which you all have experiences of just navigating that. I didn't know how to help these young people, so it was kind of half social work, half art teacher at that point. And then I taught middle school, which is its own intense thing and hard, and had to adapt again. But basically, 7 years of being a first-year teacher. And so it kind of was hard, let's just say that. And I was looking for a new phase of my career, not just because of the hardness, because I was a really good teacher, and I loved so much about teaching, but I felt like there was another phase of my career where I wanted to maybe use my art in a more direct way. Not that I was using art every single day as a teacher, and I became a much better artist through teaching than I did at RISD, just so you know. Maybe not, but different skills, right? Art school taught me some things, but teaching art to young people who do not want to learn it sometimes will teach you a lot about art. I feel like I didn't study. I taught myself art growing up. I grew up in France to American parents, so I had a really weird, interesting background of education, and I taught myself through going to museums and through drawing, which I was very lucky to do. But then I had to teach a lot of students, the theory by the book, and I had to go study that. So that was an interesting. Anyways, I'm going through a lot of different stories here, I feel like. So then I wanted to pivot careers basically at 30, which is really hard. You think you need to have it figured out by 22. Boy, do you feel like you need to figure it out by 30. And I'm so glad I didn't give up on myself and didn't say, okay, well, I put so much time and investment, I got a credential, I should continue this because I've invested time. No, like pivot again, try something new. There's new chapters to your career. So I went to school online for a graphic design degree while in school or while teaching. It was UC Berkeley Extension, which is a great little program. It was very career focused, which is what I needed at the time, which is not that long ago, actually. And then I tried applying to jobs, and if anyone's been trying to do that, it's really hard. I got nothing. You know, it was really hard to break into a new industry. I think the job market is incredibly hard, as you're hearing from everybody. There's a lot of people who want jobs. There's a lot of like complicating factors to trying to find jobs right now, I feel like. So I felt a little lost. This is about a year ago, so lost again, I guess. And in that, I was like, well, what attracted me to graphic design was books, but I thought, well, I'm never gonna get into books and publishing. It felt like this little industry in New York. I live in Oregon. I just felt maybe I didn't believe in myself enough that I was, I back myself, but I'm not so good that of all the remote workers, and they're gonna choose me, in Oregon. I don't know, it just felt maybe far flung, so I was applying to a lot of things, and then I got an opportunity with, actually with Overcut Press in Portland to learn as an intern, and then I applied to a job I wasn't qualified for, which you should also try to do, with a small publisher in Seattle called Mountaineers Books. If you're a hiker, I'm a big backpacker hiker, so they do guidebooks. If you see a little M on the spine of books, that's Mountaineers. They're great, and they took a chance on me as a freelancer because I asked hey, you're not gonna give me this job, but could I be a freelancer? And because they couldn't pay maybe as much, they're like, we make up for that in helping and mentoring and helping you, which is exactly what I needed. I need someone to take a chance on me. And so it was a good, convenient kind of relationship for us where I will do my best, but I will ask questions. I'm not gonna pretend like I know all things. And they will not pay me as much, but it's okay because I'm also learning. And so I kind of I applied my learning to the book cover, but mostly the interior layout of this book. And YouTube was my friend, and asking questions was, really essential. And I did that first book, that layout. After that, I applied to a Macmillan internship. So that's Macmillan Publishers is one of the big 5 publishers. If you know publishing, it's mostly dominated by big 5 publishers. There are a lot of independent presses, but mostly it's like Penguin, Random House, Hachette, HarperCollins, Simon Schuster. Yeah, I think that's all of them. And so I applied once and didn't get it. And then I was like, okay, I applied again in the spring and I got it that time. So it was a remote remote paid internship last summer. Again, next year will be 10 years since I graduated my undergrad, and I had that feeling and I'm applying to an internship. It's really hard for your ego, right? And I'm so glad I did it, because I just sort of thought of it as, this is my work training, this is my apprenticeship. If you think about old times about artists, you were apprentice, you had mentors, you were, learning from, and what is an internship but that, especially if it's paid, make sure they're paying you. But I was like, okay, this is hard for my ego and my life path, right? I'm doing an internship, and I was along with I was 10 years older than most people, but that became kind of my superpower, was my path was different. And I want you to all, if there's one thing I want you to learn is at least from me, is make that your strength. There's only one you. You don't be like that person who's so good at that. Oh, I wish I was like them. No, you are you. You have your skills and your path, right? And I wouldn't trade my path. I would not be the designer I am today without those years of teaching. Let me tell you that. Not a chance. Not a chance. It's one of the hardest jobs I've ever done was being an art teacher, and it made me resilient, it made me tough, it made me adapt to different people. You'll probably end up doing some form of teaching at some point, whether that's paying some bills through a little bit of mentoring of the neighbor's kid, or teaching someone within your company. If you end up working for a company, you will teach in some capacity because art is sharing, right? And you need to pay the bills. Let's see, what else have I not? I think that a fail, I don't know about, it's so many fails, right, along the way. I wish I had explored more during college. I had an idea of what I joined the painting department because that was held as an ideal of like the most, like, if you're gonna end up in galleries and in books, you're gonna be a painter, you know, and it better be abstract of some kind or some have, like, you need to have some intense, like, thing. And I'm so glad I went to the painting department because it allowed me to learn how to speak about art and back my ideas and grapple with ideas because it pushes you, right? So, but it was later in my degree that I did printmaking a bit more, and I did film and photography, and I'm so glad I did those other experiences and got out of the painting department. So I think always doing more and trying different things is gonna be helpful, I would say. So I should have done more of that. And then, yeah, meaningful experience. Being a teacher, so much respect for teachers. And if you're thinking about being a teacher, don't take this experience as sort of, oh, I shouldn't do it. Everyone says it's so hard. Yes, it's hard. It's also probably the most rewarding job I'll ever have in my life, right? Going to like middle school graduation in Estacada, like there are some kids that were like, at the beginning of the year, were like, screw you, like I don't want to be in this class. And we worked together, at the end of the year, they like want to give me a hug, like, and we're like, thank you so much. Like, come on, like this, you can't get, that's just the best of life, is someone who will always see you as a mentor in their life. And now I see them at Fred Meyer, so, you know, they can't get rid of me. So here are some books that I've been working on. So I just got my first cover design. Oh, I should really say a little bit more. I'm a junior designer. I work on book covers. So that's original designs, but also I lay out mechanicals, we call them. Basically, I'm as a junior, I take the hardcover jacket, I convert it to the paperback. But sometimes I work on original jackets as well. So it's pretty technical in a lot of ways, but a lot of creative. So I am very lucky. I got to design Best Offer Wins. That comes out in November. It's a mystery thriller if you're into that. It's very fun. I recommend it. And the one on the left is an illustration on a romance book that just came out last week. So if you go to Powell's or somewhere, you might be able to find it there. And this is the first book I worked on. It's an interior, so it was book cover and interior. So much more of a technical approach, much more like a little less of the creative, but problem solving was really important in that one. It's kind of satisfying too. I could go on forever about the one in the middle, but I won't bore you. You can ask me later if you want how many rounds I did on that one. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
And I just want to say, we've heard from our panelists and we've heard so much from them. I have a few questions prepared. I want to make sure to leave, it might just be 5 or 10 minutes at the end, if that, because we're all hearing such great information. But let's just start off and just do a really quick sense. Tell us what a typical day, even though there might not be any such thing, but like, what are the sort of decisions you're having to make? What are the problems you're having to solve? What are the highlights and the lowlights of any given day? And I'll just start at the end with Rob so we can just bring it.
My day, so I did my best to organize my home and work life, and it's much to my wife's dismay. So like I did keep my screen printing really close by because it is helpful to me to just have it just a couple steps away in the garage. And then my store is only like a 5-minute drive from my house. It's helpful to me to eliminate any roadblocks like travel, like waiting in traffic. So my day is just like getting up, and I have to have some kind of routine. So like I walk my kid to middle school, to the bus stop, and walk my dog. And that's the only thing that's a given every day. Everything else is just a series of me reshuffling my schedule to account for whatever chaos approaches me that day. Often it's rearranging my schedule because of other people that I am kind of counting on. You just have to be, as an artist, I personally have to be just really flexible. But usually, eventually, by like 10 a.m., I'm out in the garage and printing. And then I have to stop at a certain point because I have to sit in front of the computer at some point to actually send invoices and get paid for things, which is the most boring part. I hate invoicing, and I hate going back and forth in emails with I print for other people a lot, so I'm often going back and forth on their art and telling them the prices and figuring out all that. And it gets very boring. So half the time, well, more than half the time I'm printing for other people. The other half the time I'm printing stuff for my store. I also have a sticker printer, and I brought some stickers. I didn't bring like a t-shirt cannon, but I brought some. Later afterwards, you can all grab a free sticker. So, I'm printing stickers while I'm multitasking. I'm printing stickers, and I'm screen printing, and I'm emailing. And I kind of wish I had a little more structure, and like every day at 1:00, I'm stopping what I'm doing. But in my case, the ADHD is real. So do your best.
Yeah, I don't know about a normal day, but I can tell you what I've been doing because it's a little bit more exciting. There's the Percent for Art, which I don't know if Oregon City has, but Portland has it, Lake Oswego, many cities throughout the country have it. So there was a new rec center built, and artwork is going in. And it's been 2 years of planning. A lot of that is, I'll just frankly say, because of bureaucracy, but that's a part of the job. Also boring computer work, huge part of the job. But the wonderful part is, like yesterday, working with people that I've been so fortunate to network with, and really, there's no way public art could exist at all unless it was with the expertise of many different fields. And seeing a 2,600-pound sculpture in the air attached to a crane, and knowing that it got there because of the work that I did, and knowing that I can trust all of the people that I'm working with because they're really good at what they're doing. And just having like that moment feels really good. And then, sitting in traffic inevitably, and probably sitting in a 3-hour organic chemistry lecture, thinking about benzene rings until I'm blue in the face. My days are usually pretty jam-packed with a lot of coordinating, a lot of communications with people from the city, a lot of communications with artists, architects, and I can't say that is really fun or exciting, but like I said, it does culminate in a really wonderful moment where it makes that work worth it. So I'll be doing that again tomorrow too. Yeah.
My day starts with cats at the door and needing to feed them or else I get clawed. And then making coffee and then going to work. I'm a teacher and I'm also a therapist. I specialize in treating trauma. So I help students understand how trauma is encoded in the brain. I help students understand materials and media and art therapy and how to regulate the nervous system, and give them skills in the classroom that they then can practice with each other as they prepare to become therapists, to work with clients out in the world. Tomorrow I'll be teaching an expressive arts therapy elective class where we're going to talk about polyvagal theory and the nervous system, and how working with music, art, dance, all of the arts expressive ways of engaging helps to create regulation in the body, because we hold tension and trauma in our bodies, and how to use the different art modalities to work through that in a way that's scaffolded where people feel safe. So I just went and bought some clay from Georgie's. I'm really excited to stick my hands in it. And I also have a music therapist as a guest speaker in my class, which will be fun. And we're going to do a drum circle. So, so the day kind of depends on which class I'm teaching. I'm also teaching an equity-based community practices class, and we're going to do a community dialogue around gun violence. And I have an exhibit up in the gallery space where we've created art with the community over the past year addressing gun violence. And so we're going to have curated conversations around gun violence, having people look at the artwork and use that as a catalyst for dialogue and deepening understanding between people across differing perspectives. I'm also hosting a film festival and working with students to try to get the film festival promoted out in the world. So that's all.
Cool. I have a newborn, so that throws the curve off a little bit. And usually what I do is I get up in the morning when he needs to be fed, and he's only 2 months old, so it's every couple hours. So that it changes the nature of my sleep schedule and my ability to work for uninterrupted periods of time. But I will tell you what an ideal day goes like when I can balance being a new dad with what I would typically do on a given day, like the last 15 years of my experience as a professional comic book artist. So depending on if you have received like a script, you might be doing thumbnails all day, and that's a lot of problem solving. It's the same kind of like, where you have like, all right, here's a scene that is an establishing shot, but depending on how many times you have to draw this thing, would you want to show it from a really low angle, or is it useful because there's going to be a plot point later with the roof that you have to be able to maybe draw it from an above angle, which I almost would never recommend except for in that instance where it has some storytelling function. So those kind of things, you're making a bunch of those choices. And on a really good day, I might get 4 pages done of thumbnails, and if I'm past that point and I've solved all of the little, complicated labyrinthian things that can come with how do you fit all these panels on a page? Have you made sure that there's space for dialogue? Are there going to be any edits? Is this person you're working with as a writer the kind of person who might decide later on they want more of a scene with this character because that character is going to be incorporated into a different line of comics that they didn't tell you about when you first started doing thumbnails? So like, they're going to do a separate run with Gooseman, and you make sure you focus on, okay, well that throws everything off, then you have to go back and do all that. So like right now, because I'm working with Steam, the person who's the head writer, occasionally I'll have a meeting with them and we'll go over stuff, or they'll say, okay, we want you to get chapters 3 and 4 done because we have to show that to our development team so that they can start building the armatures based on your designs for this thing that's going to come out in South Korea in 2 months. And that's going to be our soft launch, and then we're going to do X, Y, Z. So it can be this weird, complicated thing. And when I was younger and I thought, I'm going to be a comic book artist, get a job at Marvel, and then you don't have to do anything else. You just coast. That's not what happens. I drew Spider-Man for the first time when I was 29, and then nothing for 14 years. So, any gig is a chance for you to try and figure out certain things on your own, whether it's the type of stories you want to tell or the stuff you love doing or don't love doing. And so, a lot of my day is, I'm drawing at a computer because that's faster than, for the longest time I held out because I grew up without a computer for 24 years. And then I started working in professional illustration, and you find out really fast that there's a lot of alteration your clients want, and you have to be adept at making sure that you preserve all the opportunities so you can have files that have a bazillion different layers because you might have to change any given one of them depending on the caprice of whatever creative director you have to interact with. And that's, because I'm a freelancer, I have different bosses all the time. So Steam wants something different than Heroic Signatures. You might have an editor at Marvel who's super cool and is like, yep, sure, rubber stamp, whatever. And then you might have somebody who's micromanaging every little bit of everything you do. They don't like the panel layout. A character would never hold a lightsaber in their left hand. We don't do that. At Lucasfilm, they're all right-handed unless it's Mace Windu. Like, whatever the thing is, there's always something. So as a freelance comic book artist, that's my typical day is you front stack with a bunch of stuff in the morning, make sure you've read all your emails. You try and do as much work as you can, check your email again around 11 or 1 just in case, and then you do as much as you can until 5 or 6. And my recommendation for why you'd stop at that point is because if you don't, you're gonna burn out. You will hit bottom. And that's why oftentimes when people talk about comics, they're almost always talking about writers, because writers can work on 12 books. comic book artists, because you spend 8 hours a day or more on a page, you burn out. You just can't physically do that much. And you get paid more, but it's exhausting. So making sure that you set criteria. Okay, I'm not going to work past this point. And anytime I have a brother who's also a visual artist, he's always bragging out his like, I did another all-nighter. I'm like, then you failed. Like if you made the choice to stay up again all night, then you've done the wrong thing. You made a mistake somewhere in the chain. That does happen, but I really try to avoid it. I'm gonna be 45 next month. There's no way I would do an all-nighter now unless they were paying me crazy, crazy money. I've had to do it. I've had to work New Year's Eves multiple times, but that was for crazy money or crazy opportunities. So that's my day typically. I make food for my wife, I make food for myself, and then I have at least a couple hours or maybe I get a chance to do some doodles and then I go to bed and starts all over again.
Yeah, if you can stay out of the all-nighter Olympics, you're better off for it. Trust me, art school, art departments, like just sleep. Sleep's so good. It's so important. Anyways, it's good to go after freelancer because I think that's an important thing to think about, which I had not really known much about when I was an art teacher going into this space as a graphic designer is, do you work better as a freelancer or as an in-house person? There's gonna be perks to either one. You might want to have a cycle of different kinds of projects, or you like the kind of security and the sort of predictability of being in-house. So I'm in-house as a graphic designer, so that means that I know when I start my day and I'm paid for those hours and only those hours, and I know when I end my day. And when I choose sometimes to maybe do a little bit more, then that's on me, that's okay. But it should be overtime, right? So I work remotely, very lucky, work remotely with New York. And I'm also very lucky that my boss likes me to have a sort of normal schedule for a West Coaster. So I actually start at 7:30, which is very lucky. I know it sounds really early, but 7:30 is it's 10:30 for them, right? Yeah, okay. 10:30 for them, and my boss has scheduled meetings so that it works for all of us. It works for them too because, I work an hour later than a lot of them so I can catch those last emails. If someone needs something, needs a file, needs a cover, and they're all gone, I can take care of that. So it's a win-win too. So I start my day by going downstairs, trudging downstairs with my coffee, looking sort of put together and joining a meeting most of the time in front of my computer. So top half looks great, bottom half, pajamas. But my boss, don't tell her that. So I have a meeting, usually art department meetings, one-on-one meetings with my studio manager. Most of our week gears up to the cover meeting on Thursdays for us. So in publishers, you are working with editors and marketing and PR, and they have books that they are working on, and you are working on the covers for them. And it goes through so many rounds of covers that you're going to show, and they're going to say yes or no, or change this or change that. So it's going to be you're working together as a team to get to that, kind of pitching them a little bit. So I do a meeting. I like to front load my mornings with a lot of my logic stuff, my problem solving stuff that works for me. And then I like to do my creative stuff in the afternoon where I can let go of time and not check my email. So finding maybe a little bit of rhythm for yourself is good, and so I do a lot of so I work with Adobe products, so basically almost exclusively on the screen. So InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator, but mostly InDesign for me. And so I'll be working on, if you took a book and you ripped off the exterior and you laid it flat, that's what I work on basically, but digitally. And so I work on all the little quotes and the image and all that and making sure everything looks right before it gets printed. That's a really simplified version of what I do. But typical day, today I did some licensing of typefaces. I archived our covers, boring stuff, but honestly, I kind of like boring stuff too. Like after being in schools for a long time where I got used to never silence, It's kind of nice. You put on a podcast, you put on, my boss tells me you can have, just throw on like a Netflix, movie and like do this boring task. It's okay as long as the task gets done well. So yeah, to do a lot of the sort of boring things potentially. And then the afternoon, if I am working on a project, so a cover, right now I'm working on a cover for a new book. I like to use my afternoons because New York is kind of ending their day. They're going to leave me alone at a certain point, so I can kind of ignore my email a little bit more. But email rules my life, basically. It's mostly answering emails. That's most of my work. Yeah, tons of, I don't know. It's half problem solving, half creative for me. Maybe not exactly half, but a lot of trying to fit text into a cover and having you like it enough to buy that book, which is a really hard thing to do.
Thank you to all of you. Any ways in which you feel like this really does suit your personality? We'll do like super, super quick if that works.
Yeah, I mean, my personality is gregarious, and so it makes sense that I have surrounded myself, like I said before, surrounded myself with creatives. I'm really good at identifying my shortcomings and where people can make up for those, and then giving them support, and paying them as much as I can when I can. If you can't, find people that want to work with you because your ideas are also important and valuable. So if you are like farming out your artwork like I do, you have to find a way to make it fair for everybody as you can. And then luckily just had like huge support. If you really want to succeed, maybe have my parents, I guess. That's not really helpful advice. I don't think they're adopting right now. But no, I did have a lot of support growing up, and you can overcome not having support, but make your support. Make support with the people around you. That was the most important thing about college. I joked about getting an English degree, but I did make really valuable connections and learned how to do something kind of miserable for a certain number of hours every day and get through it for a number of years, and make connections and make friends that I still talk to these days. And I'll keep it short.
Thanks. I would say, I think my current role suits my personality. I'm brutally straightforward and candid, and if you're not giving me a straight answer and I need a straight answer, I will get the straight answer. And that's super important because there really is no room for error. Like I said, when there's a 2,600-pound granite sculpture in the air, especially if down the road kids are going to be playing on it. So all of that has my name attached to it. And so I like to be very clear on what I'm asking, what information I'm looking for, what I'm hearing, et cetera. Maybe because I was raised on the East Coast, I don't know. I feel like I'm also a huge empath, and I really work well with all different kinds of people in all different roles because I really try to put myself in their shoes, and I really try to hear them out where they're coming from, whether it's an artist, whether it's a concrete contractor. Not that we're having heart-to-hearts every day, but we're all human beings, and I feel like while it maybe does drain me in some regards, it also does make it easier for me to connect with people. I'll stop there.
I too am an empath. I care deeply about people and society and relationships. I'm an introvert, so it's hard. Going first today was really hard, but I did it, and I kind of stumbled through it. I always have a hard time finding my words, and I sometimes don't know what I feel, and I have to make art about it to understand and know what's going on inside of me, and then I can talk about it. So that is, I think, the main thing.
Oh, thank you. I'm an extrovert, but I spend a lot of time alone. And so I really enjoy when I get to do comics conventions, but COVID changed that. So the last major run of shows I did was in 2019. And then I did one at the Boise Comic Arts Festival, which was really fun because I do it at the zoo. So my wife probably hears me talk a lot, to her chagrin maybe. So there are ways in which it serves me when I'm interacting with people who can give me jobs. Because I feel like aptitude I do have, and the thing I love to do just generally is if I meet somebody and I've interacted with them long enough, I like to tell them what I think is great about them in a way that I feel like I can do sincerely, because I have, this is a grim turn on this, but I've experienced a lot of death in my life. And so I don't like to hesitate when I have the opportunity to make somebody's day better. But most of the time I'm alone in a room working on comics. So I'm, I don't know that I'm perfectly suited towards it. There's a lot of socially dysfunctional people. If you get into my industry, you'll meet a lot of people who are, man, it is wild. But I think the service that I can provide is helping bridge that gap between somebody who does not necessarily have a ton of social aptitude, but I know has a lot of talent. And so I do like the chance to mentor people when I can. My mentor, Steve Lieber, I'll tell you this real quick. He does a thing at Books with Pictures in Portland. I highly recommend, if you are at all interested in sequential art, that you go seek this guy out, because he does First Fridays and he does portfolio reviews with a high degree of precision and care and consideration. He's not going to sugarcoat anything, but he's incredibly helpful. He's a master storyteller and very articulate in terms of pointing out what you do and don't do well. So, I think that, like you were saying, there's a teaching component to almost anything that you do, whether you're teaching people you're interacting with, on a public art project, how to interact with you and what you need, or, if you're working with a client who's a vendor, or if you're working with somebody you're giving therapy to, or who wants to be a therapist. All of it is interacting in a way that your job is to facilitate interaction between human beings, and your artwork on some level, you're making it not just for an audience of yourself, like Henry Darger. You're trying to make it with the premise that somebody will see it and get something out of it, or you're expressing it, and I feel like the human interaction component is a huge part of it.
I'm thinking about my two careers and trying to find the commonality, because I think that's sometimes interesting as to why are those two careers successful but different for me as a teacher and a designer, and I see them both as successful, just different phases for me. And I think that for me, what's helped me be successful and how it's helped serve me, both of those jobs, has been my ability to adapt, my flexibility, and I think that comes from my roots of being in a, American, French, bilingual, just really interesting in between zones. So being able to relate to people and adapt to situations is something that I've used in all my things I've done. And I think it's something that's really important for both of those, a teacher, designer, being able to adapt. You're entering a time where there's gonna be a lot of adapting with technology. We don't need to go into AI today, but you're gonna adapt a lot, right? But people before me have adapted a lot. When computers came along, you hear themes of adaptability. There's no static in your career, so you're gonna have to be able to adapt, which is really hard. And then being able to put my ego aside, that's huge. As a teacher, not being liked, it's okay, that's hard, not being liked, and you wanna be liked, and you have to put that aside. That's so good for you, that's so good for me, and it helped me as a person. So being able to bounce back, be able to be intrinsically motivated, I think it's something that's huge for me, is like perseverance, and also that's from inside of myself and not from someone saying, good job, you did a good job, I like your art. It's like, I need to get this cover the way I like it. I need to get, I need to keep working at it. That's from inside of you. And so if you're a person that, I think it's something we all need to work on anyways as artists. I think there's no one that can survive without that kind of inner drive work and putting your ego aside constantly, or else it's going to hurt a lot. Any career in the arts.
Do you want to go to, it's one of the last slides. So I want to make a little space for at least a couple questions. If anybody has any, just raise your hand, and then you just try to project. And if you have someone you specifically want to direct this question to, just say who it is. Who wants to go for it? Go for that one. Oh, and I'll repeat that. We got a question from the audience. What is, in any of your careers, the question that you're least likely to be asked, but that's the most important? Did I get that? Great. Freestyle. Grab it if you want it.
Should I start? All right. So the thing that I think very few people ask is, am I constitutionally well suited to this job? Because I try to determine this whenever I do portfolio reviews. I ask people two questions. What do you think you do well? And what do you think I could help you do better? And if they answer the first question like, oh, I'm awesome at anatomy, and I look at their artwork and I'm like, no, you are not, then I know they're bad at self-assessment. And so if, in my industry, there's so many people, and you see it all the time in tons of other industries, whether it's music or dance or whatever else, where somebody has the passion for it, but they're not configured in such a way where that would be easy without a lot of self-assessment, without a lot of community. And I hate to see that I can kind of tell when somebody's not going to make it, because I want to be optimistic. I want to believe everybody can make it. But if it's NBA numbers of people who are functionally making comics for a living, there's going to be some people who won't. It's like the mathematics of it just doesn't work out so that everybody can be, functioning in this industry. So that's the thing I think about most of the time is like, can you give me an honest assessment of whether or not I'm going to make it? And if I don't, why? What could I do? Is there anything I could do to make it? And in some cases, if somebody's willing to do that level of soul searching, they'll probably be able to do it. But if they don't, if they're habitually unself-reflective, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. And unless you are so talented, or the tumblers of the universe arrange themselves in a way where the physics of bouncing a ball against the wall, it fuses and then there's quantum tunneling and it explodes into a sun. Like that level of unlikelihood is the case with people who aren't self-reflective. So that's what I would say. If that's helpful or not, I don't know.
Well, my art practice is pretty dwindling currently, but I do work with artists every day, so I could speak to that. I think, I don't know that I'll articulate an exact question, but with public art, I love to see artists who have focused their careers on indoor exhibitions, 2D portable works, and made the leap into public art. There's far more things to consider and to be accounted for. I think a lot of artists are experts at creating. They're not experts at maintaining artwork. And so my job and a lot of my colleagues' jobs are to assess whether the artwork is sustainable, for instance, in a permanent art collection that's owned by a city. Is it sustainable to be outside in a park for 60 years, for 30 years? So I think artists are very good at tapping into that river of creativity that a lot of humans desire to be swimming in, but that doesn't make them good at using materials. So, or it doesn't make them good at understanding how materials interact. It's incredibly complicated. So I think if that's something that isn't in your purview or something that you're interested in building a better education around, Clackamas Arts Alliance has tons of resources for building that vernacular in your portfolio. I'm pretty good at responding to emails. A lot of other artists who are successful in public art usually are willing to offer some advice, and I know RAC also has a lot of good resources. There's plenty of resources out there, so yeah.
Real quick. I think it's a really good question. I don't have a helpful answer to it, but I did write down a question that I've never asked before, and that's how many freezer weevils is a lot of, how many would you count? I never thought I'd say that series of words, but is that?
I think I feel like I blocked those numbers out, but I want to say I was getting into like 400 to 500.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of freezer weevils. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so you're asking if the person who's working on the book cover, whether they're reading that manuscript, that story before they're designing. Is that right? Or if there's someone else that's doing that? Whoever's working on it, yeah. A good designer should always read the source, the story, but we have incredibly busy work lives, and so I hear a variety of things. I hear some people who might do 50 pages and get a general sense. And maybe I also know it depends on the person. I know one of my mentors will read and design at the same time and really says that that's a huge part of her process. And she's a top tier designer, and I think that's really interesting. I'm figuring out my own process right now, but yeah, I try to always read what I'm designing. Do you read? I guess do you get manuscripts as well as a graphic novel designer?
Yeah. So typically, like if you get a chance to do a cover, the hard thing can be that oftentimes it will be in advance of when the book is coming out. So you'll have to sometimes do stuff on imperfect information. Maybe they don't even know. Where they're like, well, we have to hold a place for this, so it's going to come out in this catalog. So can you do? It's like I've done license covers for like Ghostbusters and stuff like that. And my advice on that would be never submit ideas you're lukewarm on because that's the one they're going to pick. Right down the middle, symmetrical is often what I'll get requests for, and then it'll be things like because somebody's agent is like, well, they need to be more prominent. So can you move, I don't know, Dan Aykroyd to the back? And move Paul Rudd to the front, but get rid of his beard because he didn't like the way he looks with the beard, or like whatever the thing is. And so there are times where some of this stuff, it's very different in some ways because I know this is an experience that I had when I was working on my own project for Macmillan, that sometimes there will be, I don't know if this is still a thing, but a kind of conventional wisdom that like, all right, well, this season, there's too many green covers. So don't do green. Is that a thing?
I am too fresh to be able to speak on that, but I think that is marketing might be like, well, if there's a whole shelf of yellow books, we want to stand out. My job is to make books that fit in and stand out, fit into their genre, but stand out within their genre. If you look at any romance bookshelf, they're like, you gotta, or romantasy and all that stuff, fantasy, they need to fit in, but they also need to be like a new hot thing, right? What I will say though, before a very simple answer though, I do need to say is that if you have a book, so for example, I had the Friends with Benefits book, there's 2 characters, physical descriptions, like those are important. You need to make sure that you know and have that, or ask the editor and the author, do we know what they look like? Do you have any specific things you want? Because that illustration changed a lot throughout its creation. How much an author get to have a say? So you're asking, how much do authors have a say in their covers? It varies a lot, and I'm not actually. I don't communicate with the author at all because I work for a big publisher, and so. But I don't know about small publishers. But I think typically the cover designer, the graphic designer will work with typically an editor who is sort of the go-between, and the editor has a lot of power over that book and how it should be marketed. It probably sounds very corporate, and it is. There's a lot of corporate in it, but you're trying to make a thing together that will sell to get that story out there. Because you could have the best book, but if it's not getting that market, and you don't know that you might like that book because you like the last, this type of book before, it's not going to sell very well. So it has to be, like as an artist and as a designer, you have to think about marketing, unfortunately, about how you're going to pivot yourself and put your art in the right place for the right audience. I haven't talked to any author directly. It's been sort of my designs are shown, or other artists, designers are, they're shown to the author. We get feedback from the author. It's this whole complicated web.
So we got a question about freelancing. As you're starting out, how do you find stability while trying to scavenge clients? You might be struggling to find clients. I'll put this on the table.
For me, so I I began by like screen printing I was making short films with a group. So I would make short film, like t-shirts celebrating our film group, Cinema Queso. I would reach out to all of my like friends who were in theater and like make shirts for their sketch troupe and for pennies. Like, you know, my business model was I buy blank shirts for $3. I put art on them and I sell them back to them for anywhere from like $6 to, if they have money, $10. If they don't have money, $6. And then there were times when there wasn't a lot of clients. So it's fun to, in my particular case, you can like see maybe some businesses you go to, maybe a coffee shop you enjoy, maybe take a quick picture of their sign, maybe make them go ahead and burn a screen, make them a sample. They don't get mad if you deliver their own logo to them on a thing. And then you'll say, hey, if you like this, I can make you more of these. So there's lots of ways to be proactive and approach people and find you find the people. For me, it was the businesses right by me. And then when if I didn't find people that were going to hire me to print their things, then in my downtime, I was making my own stuff about Milwaukee specifically, and then stuff I was taking to Comic-Con and stuff just whatever. So yeah, just have to keep yourself busy with something all the time.
I worked as a waitress and then was like producing things late at night for like art sales or things like that. Trying to find a coffee shop where I could like hang my art and hopefully get somebody to make a call. That was before Etsy existed. But having I went to School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and so they'd have like a fair where you could like sell your wares and buy a table. So looking for those venues where you can make things that people would want. But my real gig was waitressing, which made rent so that I could have food to be able to continue to do the grind.
So as a freelancer, the hard thing is stability is almost never going to be the case. So I'll try and make this as succinct as possible. When I was in college, I was also an anthropology minor. And the first ethnographic film I ever saw was Nanook of the North. Do you remember the scene where he's jumping on ice floes and he'll hit it a little bit and then he jumps onto it and he has to make his way across this frozen strait? And so they're like, every season Nanook makes his way and sometimes the next jump could be his last. It's like that all the time, right? So like the way to save yourself from that dynamic as much as possible is to find community, whether it's, you're finding local businesses that you appreciate and you enjoy. So I would do that sometimes. Like my favorite restaurant, no longer around, is called Zell's. I made a comic about why I loved it. This was during COVID lockdown and the first administration, and I really needed a place that made me feel less, out of my mind. And so I made this thing just to make it. But you never know what thing's going to lead to what. So a major book I did for Image Comics is because I did a free piece for this Seattle Comic-Con thing, the book they call Monsters and Dames. And, some of it was cheesecakey, gross, over-the-top stuff, but I was like, all right, well, I can do something that's not that. So I made this lady rocking out with an animal band based on this Flaming Lips song that I liked. And then this writer, who I'd always admired, saw it, was like, hey, maybe you're the person I need for my anthropomorphic animal book. And so the gigs I'm doing right now, I have because my friend Ron Chan got too busy and was like, hey, do you want to work for Steam? And when I got the email from them, they're like, charge us like you're a lawyer. It can be however much you want. I was like, this sounds totally made up, but it's not. It just took me 15 years or more, 17 years to get to the point where I have a gig that's way different from comics. They're like, we need this yesterday. Oh no, I really thought I turned it off.
It's one of his clients. So you need to let him go do your thing.
I so rarely have it on because, occasionally my wife will need me because the baby needs me. So, you get these gigs from comic companies where they'll shorten your deadline and they'll tell you, if you can't do it, we'll bring somebody else in who can. And so then you either have to make the choice of looking like you don't know how to do your job, or you find yourself in that situation I told you to avoid at all costs earlier, an all-nighter. And so, picking your clients is a thing you can do once you have better community. And they can give you red flags about, don't work with this person. There are editors that if somebody gets to know me and I trust them, I'll say, don't work with this person. Because they're going to mess you around on your deadlines. They're going to make your life harder. And it's already hard enough to make a living doing this job. And so that's what I would suggest is, I was part of a studio that's now called Helioscope. They do have an internship program that they're starting back up. And if, I started that when I was 28. So like coming back as a person who's like, oh, I have to do this internship. They're not going to want me. I'm too old. No, I was like, my mentor told me that I was like an overstuffed cargo plane that just needed to jettison a bunch of bad ideas before I could take off. And it was true. So that like once I got in there, I made it my business to say like, until they kick me out and physically say, or grab me by the shoulders or say the words, Ben, you gotta go. I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna learn as much as I can. And if somebody tells me to do something, I'm gonna do it. At least I'm gonna try it. So the more you have contacts with people, the more you establish yourself as a person who is trustworthy, kind, isn't gonna talk badly about them behind their back or undermine them to a client or whatever. There's any number of faux pas people will do. But building strong community is a huge part of it. Find yourself a mentor. If somebody says they'll mentor you and they seem decent and you've asked around about them and they seem cool, then believe them when they tell you they're willing to do it. And they may not always be available, but I tell young people this all the time. I'm like, you want to make art for a living? I remember wanting to do that too. Email me. If you're interested in doing sequential art or you're interested in doing, posters for bands or, illustrations for book covers or, whatever. I have done stuff for so many different things like storyboards with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in them and Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and boot commercials. And like, you never know what's going to lead to stuff. So the more people you have, that who are familiar with you and your work, the better. That's the way, if you're trying to get around the idea of what's stable, if you want stability, don't do this job. But if you think that you can manage that ice floe jumping, then build community because they can tell you, well, historically, go south by southwest or whatever, and like that, those are the good ones,
Keep this super tight because I know it's at the end. However, as someone who was changing careers and like, oh no, getting an in-house, job, like everyone wants them, I thought I might need to do freelance. Here's what I was just practically thinking about as a starter, because you're not going to be able to get all these clients lined up right away. Like it's not going to happen, right? So I started with one and I thought about, okay, if I need to go freelance completely, I might have a side gig of something and start to like really take on, foster that first client relationship as if it's the most important thing ever and be such a professional on it, holding your boundaries, like I cannot get that to you by, Monday because it is now Friday, end of day, and I'm not, whatever. But you might need to work some weekends too. That's just part of the life. But being such a professional that they recommend to other people, that's your second client. And then, oh, well, I've been working on networking, so I am going to the, Clackamas thing, and I'm going to talk to other professionals. That's another networking thing. Oh, I have a person. I can't do this book anymore. Can you take it on? So like you're gonna add like layer after layer of clients, and it's through that kind of. It's not going to be like going to like Fiverr or whatever. What is it like? Yeah, like oh no, I'm not getting anything because I don't remember what the names of those websites are where you get like maybe you get stuff through there, but if you're not, that's not you're a failure. It's just those websites are not built for that. It's going to be through that kind of this kind of work. You coming here already, you're ahead of your peers for being here tonight. You're going to do better than, they're going to do great too, but you are doing, like no shade to them, but you are doing everything you need to do for yourself right now by being here.
Well, thank you so much to all of our amazing panelists. Round of applause. And And I want to offer some shout outs and some thank yous, some gratitude. So we are here at Clackamas Community College. Thank you to your instructor, Rachel, for being a fabulous host and partner in this. Rachel also, if you don't know, I know that she just left the room, but she has a background in education, not just at a community college level, there she is, but like at multiple stages. So if you're a student here and you want to reach out to her about that, she's here for that. Yes, and thank you to each one of these people. I also want to say thank you to our filmer, Melody from Willamette Falls Studios. So I know you also have some filmmaking that goes on here. That is another great organization here in Oregon City to get involved with. I have heard that sometimes people come from here and then end up doing work to really get the ins and outs of what it is to do film and video work. And that could be another good launch point. So she might be busy, but like you might also reach out to Willamette Falls Studios. In the back of the room, the person who checked you in, Sue Allen, is another lovely person who works for Clackamas Arts Alliance. And so I just want to say, if you're looking, as we've heard, like going to coffee shops, places to exhibit art, we have a public call for art that happens towards like end of summer, fall time every year. So that's another good thing to sort of keep in the loop about. Thank you all so much. I just want to highlight one thing that we heard, which is that there's volunteer opportunities open. And I know that that's been pivotal in the course of my career. In that I've learned so much, and that's something that helps leverage and explore new job opportunities. And so there's actually so many of those. Yes, it's really good to get paid for your work. We all want you to get paid for your work. You will get paid for your work. But if you're wanting to explore, you're wanting to build network connections, community, there's so many great organizations to be involved with. Thank you all so much for joining us.